Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us on this December 8th, right in the middle of the holiday season. We're really glad you've taken a little bit of time to join us this afternoon or morning, whatever it is for you. And if you're watching the recording, welcome to you also. My name is Emma. I'm the director of the Fred Rogers Institute. I'm here at St. Vincent College, where we are based, where Fred Rogers, when he retired, chose to land his archive of materials. And this is also Fred's very original first hometown. So joining you from the original neighborhood. And I am just really glad to get this conversation started. This is the first of at least four conversations that we have planned about technology and moving toward intention with our use of technology for us as adults and also in how we support and engage younger people in using technology, integrating it into our lives. Um, Fred Rogers, of course, is certainly a model of someone that we can look to who saw a brand new technology at the time. His was television, and decided this is something that's going to matter a lot, and we should be able to use this really well for children. And he certainly did that. And there is so much that we can learn from looking at his work, looking at the way he chose to use technology, and especially the way that Fred Rogers thought about children. So with Fred's legacy as a bit of a foundation for these conversations, I'm very excited to be joined by Erin Walsh to get to talk about technology use. So Erin is the co-founder of Spark and Stitch Institute and also the author of It's Their World: Teens, Screens, and the Science of Adolescence. Erin helps families and educators navigate adolescence, parenting, and technology. She also co-authored the 10th anniversary edition of Why Do They Act That Way? And has worked nationally with schools and organizations to translate research into really practical strategies. So we'll share her bio and the link to learn more about the Spark and Stitch Institute in the chat. Um, Erin and I are going to be talking together for today's conversation and also three more that we have planned. And for some of these other conversations, we'll be joined by others who have particular lens and expertise in technology use. But today, it's just going to be the two of us talking about adolescents, in particular, young people. And so while Fred Rogers, we think about very young children because, of course, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was particularly geared toward very young children. Um, the work that we do here at the Fred Rogers Institute really spans across ages, and we know that there is so much about the way we think about very young children that we can also think about with older children as well. So, Erin, thank you for being here.
Oh, it's such a thrill. What a wonderful way to start our time together with that song and your
Mhm.
warm introduction. Thanks for being here. I'm excited to be on this adventure over the next few months together.
Me too. I thought that I would start out with a question, which reminds me, for those of you who are joining us, please engage in the chat, talk with each other, share your thoughts and reactions. If you have a particular question that you'd like for us to speak to, please make sure to put that in the little Q&A box. So we don't lose it in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. So just send those as they come to you. But to start us off, Erin, I would love for you to share why you decided to write your most recent book, particularly just what about adolescence and technology is really interesting to you. You certainly spend a lot of time with this. So what about that pulls you in?
Yeah, I love that question. I think that the threads in this book, in many ways, I was writing the book in my head for years, like many authors do before they actually sit
Mhm.
down and map it out. And I think the two threads that come together is, well, maybe three. The first is at Spark Institute, we spend a lot of time digging into the data. So I spend just a lot of time reading research studies, talking to primary researchers, attending conferences, making sure that as we think about what's the impact of media on adolescent mental health and well-being and development, I spend a lot of time digging into the data. So certainly sort of 20 years of paying attention to that. And then, 15 to 20 years of talking with mental health providers and parents and educators across the country in media centers and in conference rooms and in huge auditoriums and theaters as adults are working really hard to try to think about what does it mean to meaningfully show up for young people today with the unique
Mhm.
challenges and opportunities of this sort of ever expanding digital landscape. So those conversations, hearing people's hopes and fears and challenges, and how the data sort of meets in the messy middle of our real lives, whether at home or at school or in our programs. So, and then the third thread is, of course, I always wear my parenting hat. So I have a sixth grader and a
Mhm.
ninth grader. And
Yep.
for me in our work, we've always used that lens of development, brain science, the developmental tasks of kids to help us better understand what's going on inside children as they learn and grow. And as I was
Mhm.
watching the coverage of adolescence and media, I think in many ways we started to see this trend towards just a lot of coverage around teens and tech, around like places kids shouldn't go, scary things that will happen. Um, and I really found that that developmental lens was a warm invitation to really thinking about not just what teens shouldn't do or what harms might come of them or to them online, but also what are the possibilities? What are the developmental tasks that teens are working on? So the book really came from conversations, from science, and from my desire to have a different kind of offering that was really connecting the dots between the developmental possibilities of adolescence and what we know about screens and technology. So I don't turn away from the harms, but the book isn't organized around digital risks. It's organized around digital tasks and opportunities.
Incredible. I took a handful of notes because there's so many things you already said that I want to dig into. Can we start with parents from, your own hat as a parent and also from conversations you've
Yeah,
had with parents and educators too, people who are focused on, like you said, adults are working really hard to show up well. And I
right.
really agree with that statement. At the Fred Rogers Institute, we work with adults across all kinds of professional and personal ways of engaging with young people, and I see that constantly, that we are all working really, really hard to show up well. Um, what what have you heard and taken in from parents about, like, what are the messages that we are all receiving
Yeah,
about technology and young people? You mentioned the media has so often focused on the scary parts.
yeah.
Um, what have you understood that parents are being told about what we should do?
Yeah, I think especially in the last few years, and I think, as we dig into this together, I want to be clear that there's a lot to be concerned about. There are, we know that there are significant ways that technology might be contributing to young people's suffering. So
Yeah.
with that in mind, I do think though that the messaging has sort of become a steady drumbeat in some ways of a kind of a simple equation. And this is actually Emily Weinstein and Carrie James's work. At the Harvard Graduate School of Education Center for Digital
Mhm.
Thriving, they sort of described it like the media messaging is really like teens plus screens equals inevitable bad outcomes. Like there's this idea that sort of dose for dose, minute per minute, hour for hour, young people's engagement with tech is likely going to destroy their mental health,
Right.
inevitably lead to decline in the kinds of things that we want for young people. So that kind of simple equation, that steady drumbeat, that simple messaging, while there are certainly some times where that equation does it follows that way for some young people, I think that really simplifies what we see in the data, which is a far more sort of messy, nuanced, complicated picture that really invites us to turn towards young people with a little bit more curiosity than just teens
Mm,
plus screens equals bad. Because if teens plus screens equals bad, that really positions caring adults like kind of our only job is just to rip screens out of kids' hands. It's just to sort of occupy this role of what we call like on-off regulator. Like a good parent or a good teacher would just be trying to turn devices off. We know
Mhm.
that that's not like really the reality of our lives, but more importantly, it doesn't really take into account what young people really need, which is for us to sort of step meaningfully into their lives. Yes, with purposeful boundaries, but also with coaching and meaning making and modeling and skill building. And how do we use these tools in ways that spark digital agency and all these things that we know that these young people are going to need in adulthood, which isn't that far away for
Yeah.
adolescents. Yeah.
Yeah. So then what stands out to you most about adolescence from the research that you've done? Um, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, adolescence, generation after generation, sort of adolescence is sort of it's feared. You know, we talk about teens and this like parents are scared of this phase of development. There's a lot of sort of like teens gone wild. I think what's
Mhm.
inspiring to me as a caregiver and certainly as somebody who cares about adolescent health and well-being is that the research and the science of adolescence is pretty meaningful. I mean, the teenage brain is not just built for risk taking. It's not just built for impulsivity, which is, I think, what gets a lot of the headlines. It's really built
Mhm.
for discovery. Like the teenage brain is built to help young people answer really big, important questions like, how can I contribute? Where do I belong? Who am I? What matters to me? And because it's built to answer these questions, it does sort of develop from the sort of bottom up or back forward. So the sort of emotional centers of the brain get supercharged first, get that kind of upgrade, followed by the sort of thoughtful decision maker. The simple translation of that science is like their prefrontal cortex is broken and they can't be trusted until they're 25. But I think the more accurate translation of that science is that the teenage brain is built to propel young people out into the world to explore,
Mhm.
to experiment, to make mistakes, hopefully with meaningful adults around them who help them make sense of it. They're very sensitive to rewards, which of course can backfire in social media in particular with the sort of social feedback that they get, but it also sensitizes them to peer feedback and risk taking, which can go awry, but can also be standing up in front of your peers and reading a poem or publishing something or standing on a stage and doing those are the kinds of sensation seeking and risk taking that the teenage brain is like hungry for, and
Yeah.
we want them to be out in the world exploring. They're built around agency. How can I contribute? Because they have to do a really risky thing, which is to grow up. Um, and that road from childhood to adulthood is not always smooth, but it does have a lot of opportunities for learning. And the teenage brain is built to get out into that space and answer these questions, experiment, learn from experience,
Mhm.
and sort of build the skills that they're going to need to bring into adulthood. So when I'm in my most challenged place as a parent, I'm not saying parenting teenagers is easy, but developmental science is comforting because it helps me remember what's going on inside. Like what is driving some of this behavior? And then when is media helping them meet those needs? And when is it interfering, disrupting, or getting in the way?
Yeah. So I'm hearing you're kind of painting there's this story of for us as adults, if technology is dangerous and leads to bad outcomes, we should, the only logical thing to do then would be to take it away. And also, we have these fears, and I think this is just repeats through generations, right? That teenagers
Yeah.
are irrational and make terrible decisions, and we just need to tamp that down.
Yeah.
Um,
Risks to be managed. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So then, you and I have talked before this conversation about the way that like Fred Rogers approached
Mm,
children with such a positive
mm.
um, orientation, and he used this new media in a really positive way. So, what's the what's the counter story? You've talked about the developmental task of adolescence, and so how does technology connect with that. Like, what's the
Yeah.
best case scenario here
Yeah.
for how
Yeah.
teenagers are engaging with technology, and where's the good
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, I love this idea of like, what's the best case scenario? Because I think through the next, our time together this morning, we'll talk about that the design of some of the tools, right, is not
Hmm.
always necessarily built to maximize the best case scenario. In fact, it's often the opposite. But we do see in the data, as we think about that relationship between adolescent well-being and their media use, their outcomes when it comes to any individual adolescent. So in sort of study after study after study, we do see this sort of persistent association with more time online with worse outcomes. So that simple story doesn't come from nowhere.
Right, right.
When we're thinking about adolescent mental health and well-being, we absolutely have to take into account the role that screens and technology have in their lives. But when we turn away from the national data sets, when we turn away from averages, and we turn towards the living, breathing adolescent in front of us, it's a lot more complicated. And that best case scenario is really driven by sort of who they are, what they're doing, why they're going there, what kind of relationships they have, what kind of content they're engaging with. And so we do see that when young people are using technology to connect in meaningful ways with their peers, and those relationships are by and large healthy, that's sort of extending and deepening of friendships, that for some young people, their online communities are a critical, important space where they feel seen and known and valued, and they experience that sense of belonging. They may be watching content that disrupts harmful stereotypes, or they're watching content that helps them organize the world. So Mr. Rogers, of course, was a long believer in this idea that like whoever tells the stories defines the culture, and these media storytellers are powerful. And when those stories are pro-social, when those stories are healthy and creative, that can have a really buffering effect for adolescents, right? So the content that they're
Hmm.
engaging with, how they're connecting, and then their ability to sort of create and participate meaningfully in conversations that impact their lives. Adolescents are built around agency. And so when they can use these tools in ways that are helping them, contribute something, contribute a perspective to actually have a meaningful impact, whether it's on their school or their neighborhood. We see these sort of civic engagement opportunities, especially when they're scaffolded by meaningful adults and positive learning with peers. These sort of creative collaborative uses of technology really do meet young people's needs, especially when they don't crowd out other things we want for teens. And we do see a lot of young people using technology in this way. This doesn't mean that things aren't hard sometimes. This doesn't mean that they don't have some bad experiences, but by and
Hmm.
large, they're finding ways to connect. They're finding ways to contribute and be creative in ways that don't crowd out other important activities. So we don't hear about those stories as much. And I think,
Right.
Emma, one of the things that I really do believe is that we can hold that best case scenario and our concerns at the same time. Like we don't have to choose between them. We don't have to be like, look, everything's great. There's nothing to worry about here. Look at this little best use scenario. We're just going to ignore the way that these platforms might be designed to, take them away from those sort of self-directed activities, or might, hijack their attention, or, you know, um, really there's a lot of social comparison and sort of exploiting some of
Mhm.
those adolescent vulnerabilities. So I feel deeply concerned about that.
Mhm.
And I can hold that there are some powerful protective things happening with devices as well. And I invite us adults to be able to try to do both of those things. We don't have to choose.
Yeah. So what does that look like then? You said scaffolded by adults. So what does it look like for us, you as a parent of
Yeah,
a ninth grader? How do you scaffold young
yeah,
people to use this technology toward that best case scenario?
yeah, yeah,
What does it actually
yeah,
look like?
yeah, beautiful. So, I mean, what we know about adolescence, let's just rewind a little bit in terms of the
Mhm.
evidence. The evidence around adolescence is sometimes, as a parent, if I'm just being honest, I wish the evidence said that we could just do like command and control and just rip
Yeah.
devices out of kids' hands and that it would work. What we know about adolescents is because they're organized around agency and autonomy, like adults lecturing them, and the only interactions being lectures and limits and control and monitoring, it actually backfires. Like it inadvertently makes
Mhm.
adolescents more vulnerable to the very risks we're trying to protect them from. So sometimes the tools that we work for younger children really backfire for adolescents. And what we know
Mm,
for adolescents, that doesn't mean that we just hand them a phone at whatever age and say, good luck out there. But adolescents really need that. Dr. Lisa DeMore talks about this as this combination of warmth and structure, and I like to think of it as like purposeful boundaries and then play, exploration, coaching, communication. So we have those purposeful boundaries. And that is, if we think about the things we want to protect, like we want to protect sleep. We want to protect
mhm.
face-to-face interactions with friends. We want to protect moving our bodies. If we think about Fred Rogers lessons, like we want to protect alone time. We want to protect, some of these, uh, our ability to focus, whether it's at school or whether it's on play. So we want to sort of set these purposeful boundaries, not just around like minutes and hours because screen time is good or bad, but because we know we need these other nutrients to grow in healthy ways. So we can set those purposeful boundaries. And then within that, the scaffolding is all about curiosity, skill building, helping teenagers think through digital dilemmas, meaning I was told not to be on my phone, but my friend texted me and said that I'm the only person that they can talk to about this hard thing. What am I supposed to do? How do I be a good friend? I mean, adolescent experiences often bridge online and offline spaces. So just taking away the
Right.
phone doesn't mean that they have the emotional tools to figure out how to navigate conflict in the hallway the next day or how to
Mhm.
quiet their racing mind at night when they're trying to fall asleep, even if they don't have their phone. So I always think
Mhm.
about this as yes, we can set a tech boundary, but we also then have to replace it with this sort of skill building and
Mm.
thinking about, what are the sort of impulse control or what are the relational skills that our kids might need to practice. And a lot of that happens as our kids move out into these spaces and we're not taking over, but we're there kind of with that safe container of, okay, so that text thread went sideways. How is everybody feeling? What next? What might you do next? What are the next best steps? How do you repair? On the same way that we might on the playground when our kids are younger. So, certainly
Yeah.
there's some of those boundaries and folks might have questions. I think we do have enough research at this point. It's not perfect data, but I think parents, just paying attention to sort of our own gut, as well as looking at those statistics and associations to delay some of these social media spaces beyond early adolescence as much as makes sense for your family, delaying full-blown smartphones out of early adolescence, partially because we just want to take that scaffolding approach. We're going to do like the simple
Mhm.
watch that allows my kid to be independent, but they don't have access to social media yet. And then we practice like what goes well, what doesn't, how do we make
Yeah.
agreements? So that was a lot at once, but I think that in the spirit of sort of boundaries and skill building and exploration and play within those spaces. Like we can say no to a social media platform and then play video games with them side by
Yeah.
side. And that doesn't mean we're losing the battle against screen time. It means that we're actually building up that relational capital with our kids alongside screens, which we're going to need when things get hard.
Right, right. Um, so goodness, you did say a lot. I'm trying to decide where to go first. You you mentioned early that a lot of the tools that are out there that all of us and young people are using exploit our vulnerabilities. They exploit adolescent
Yeah.
vulnerabilities. And as you
Yeah.
were mentioning that, I was just relating to it and saying, and
Yeah.
they exploit my vulnerabilities. So you're talking about building up relational capital, and I wonder if we can talk about that example as a way of like, what does it look like between a parent and
Hmm.
a teen or someone younger to talk about what's happening online and the
Yeah.
way that some of these tools make us feel.
Yeah.
Um, I heard you say we're trying to do skill building in similar ways to what we did on the playground. So we just like talk out what that looks like,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
talk with our older children about the way our vulnerabilities can be exploited.
Yeah. Yeah, there's two pieces that I think are like core to our toolkit. And the first is that stance of curiosity, which of course is so core to Mr. Rogers' legacy and Fred Rogers' legacy is um, part of our ability to be able to do some of that coaching is to know what are we coaching in our specific kids' life. And that involves us turning towards young people with curious questions and what we call a non-judgmental stance, which is this like gold standard in parenting teens that's so hard to do. Because if we're asking questions and then as soon as they answer, we deliver a long lecture, or we're asking questions and their answer makes us be like, I knew it. It's rotten. It's all trash. Like they're going to stop answering our curious questions. So it's that ability to be like, hey, I'm wondering how things are. You're in this new space. How are things going? How do people treat each other there? What advice would you give to fifth graders in your school? Like older kids love to give younger kids advice, even if they're like, I'm fine, but fifth graders, they're really off the rails. And what are if you could change one thing about Snapchat, what would it be? Like, when does it make you feel good? When does it not? Modeling some of that. And on the parenting side, the reality is that with teenagers, we're not going to leave this session and be like, I'd like to book 60 minutes of your time, 15-year-old, and I have a list of curious questions that I'm going to ask you, and then I want you to deliver honest and vulnerable answers. Like, that's not how that goes. Because young people, in many, they're engaged in this growing up as separation individuation, which involves becoming themselves, which often involves pushing us away. So we ask these questions consistently. It's like we're planting seeds over time. Hey, I listened to this podcast and it said something about addictive technology. Like, do you think that that's a thing? When you hear the word addictive technology, what does that mean to you? Do you feel like you're in control of when and how you use your phone or not? And we're just sort of gathering data. We're gathering information about our specific kid because we might find that what's true for my child is really not true for another 15-year-old or for a 12-year-old. So curious questions are really important. And what we see in the research, at least, especially any of you who are educators, is that the sort of values alignment messaging tends to work much better for adolescents than just tech is bad. So values alignment messaging means that we're really asking young people to reflect on what they care about in the world, right? I care about present. I care about my friends. I care about um, physical movement. I care about change, right? Like there's young people's brains are built to start to answer these questions. And then to start to think about the way that tech is designed and whether the design of technology helps them live into those values or whether it interferes with them. And that can start us thinking about what is the business model of these social media platforms? And, what is the currency in today's media landscape? Oh, it's my attention. It's like my eyeball. And, it's helpful for young people to know that the top social media platforms made $11 billion off of their eyeballs, a couple of years ago when we look at the numbers. And that kind of activating, not tech is good or bad, but like, hey, who's designing these? Whose goals, like who's benefiting, who's profiting? Am I in control of this or are they trying to control me? And
Mm-hmm.
how would I design this differently? And that sort of critical media literacy lens, evidence shows, is a little more effective with adolescents than just saying, do this because it's good for you, or do this because you'll be
Right.
healthier in the far off future. That kind of activates this sense of like, I don't want to be controlled by somebody else. I don't want somebody making money off of me. I want to be in control of my time and attention. So, especially in the classroom, that values alignment messaging can be helpful. I say in the classroom because we're unlikely to sit down with our kids and engage in like a long facilitated session on values reflection and alignment, but we can start planting those same seeds. Like, how do tech companies make money? Like, do we feel like we're in control? Why are we not? How are these things designed? So looking at persuasive design, which is,
Mhm.
tech companies' sort of ability to make devices frictionless, deliver frictionless rewards where their goal is to keep our time and attention on the screen. And our goal might be to look into a face of a friend, or our goal might be able to write this essay for my English language arts class, or my goal might be to get enough sleep that I don't feel totally overwhelmed. And
Mhm.
young people who experience over time that sense of digital agency where I'm able to control the tech, it's not controlling me, have better outcomes.
Which makes so much sense, right? Because that's connected to, like you said, this core
Yeah.
developmental task of adolescence is determining themselves and their own sense of agency. And I think that's um, like what a gift if you're a teenager and an adult invites you into being curious about this bigger thing, and not just lecturing about it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
And at home, they might not turn to us and say, like, thank you so much for that thoughtful question.
Mhm,
Like, thank you
mhm.
so much for activating my awareness about how important self-directed technology use is. But what we do know is that young people are listening. And
Yeah.
so, even though they might not turn to us in that moment and say thank you, our ability to sort of ask those questions, hold the boundaries where we need to hold them. Young people do benefit from the safety and security of predictable, purposeful boundaries, just like young children. But within that, when we're able to sort of have that curiosity, I think what we are doing is planting seeds that what we want is that 19-year-old, that 20-year-old to have had some years of practice with this super powerful device in their hand of not just thinking of it as good or bad. I'm a good or bad person for holding it, but who am I? And when is this helping me live into that? And when is it getting in the way? And honestly, us adults are struggling with that as well. So I don't want to downplay just how powerful the design is. That when we look at platforms that are designed to grab and hold our attention versus considering what would the world look like if these just platforms were designed for digital agency and for healthy exploration like that. Oh, what a world that would be. So modeling that it's hard for us too. Like I
Yeah.
struggle with my own device and here's what I'm doing to sort of manage making sure that it's not getting in the way of what I really
Mhm,
care about for myself and for my family and for the world that I want to live in.
mhm. I think that this is one of the reasons this topic is so grabs us so much is because as adults we don't have this figured out. We don't have it figured out
No.
how to manage our relationship with technology. This is so new for all of us, and so to be parenting, and figuring out ourselves, and then thinking we need to help our children figure it out
Yeah,
is it's overwhelming. And so these kind of
totally.
like at the beginning what you were sharing about these really black and white kind of ideas, can feel like a
Mhm.
pull because, oh, if well, there's an answer then I can get it right.
Yes.
And I know, for there's been different conversations in the last many years about what's the right amount of screen time? What's the
Yeah.
exact right age, to get a phone or not? When when parents are, I know you have conversations with people all of the time, and so
Yeah.
when someone asks you, please just tell me what's the right thing to do,
Yeah.
how do you speak to that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this makes so much sense. Like, it's in theory, the idea that things are complicated and nuanced sounds very nice. And then when we're
Right.
at our like very most fatigued, we're like, just tell me the right thing.
Tell me what's yeah.
So I do think that my response to that is that just because things are complicated doesn't mean that we know nothing. And we've already touched on some of the things, we actually know a lot about what young people need to thrive. Like we may not know about the latest longitudinal data on AI companions and adolescent mental health. It's just too new. But we've been studying teenagers for a long time. We've been studying adolescents for a long time.
Mhm.
Um, and so there are some practical things that we can do, and we've already spoken about them. So we know, for example, we have a lot of data on sleep. We can just like, that's firm ground to stand on. Protecting
Yeah.
adolescent sleep would be like a revolution in mental health in this country, honestly. As soon as screens come close to our sleeping areas, the sleep quality goes down and sleep duration goes down. So protecting these sort of ingredients for thriving can be this helpful thing when we're feeling most in the weeds to pan up and be like, okay, I'm protecting sleep. I'm protecting
Mhm.
some time in the day where we connect as a family without, in the words of Sherry Turkle, having to compete over the roar of the internet for each other's attention,
Mhm.
where we do not have to crowd out screens in order to, or sort of claw away the noise of screens in order to connect with one another. That might be at the dinner table, that might be between shifts, that might be in the morning. It's going to be different there's so many different kinds of families. So just thinking about what's that one like sort of sacred family time that we hold, and a reminder for parents of adolescents, it's not always going to be pretty. Like family time is not always like us looking meaningfully into each other's eyes and telling each other how much we love each other.
Right.
Like it can be
Right.
rocky, it can be stormy. That's okay. Keep going.
Mhm.
The data reminds us that it really matters. So, you know, protect sleep, protect family time, protect movement and outdoor time, and protect focus around learning. If we protect those spaces, we're doing pretty well. And sort of doing that zoom up, like, oh, it feels like too much. It's like, no, okay, we
Yeah.
are making sure that these spaces are sort of maybe the word protected is a little tricky. I mean, we're not trying to protect it from something bad, but we are keeping it as sort of focused away from the distraction of some of our screens as possible. And then within that, we're playing. And I think the answer to some of the questions is we can't just deliver a simple age. So the number one question I get asked is like, at what age should teenagers get a first phone? And the reality is we don't have perfect science on this. We have better data at
Mhm.
this point on delaying social media as long as makes sense out of
Mhm.
that early adolescence. It's not perfect data, but I think we have enough at this point to say, you know what, given the objectives of these companies and given the
Mhm.
developmental sensitivities of teens, let's do our best to delay or at least slow roll that.
Yeah.
Um, Phones, we don't have some magical number that says every 16-year-old, once they're 16, they're magically ready for self-directed use, digital
Right.
agency for all, and that all 12-year-olds are suffering. We see a lot of variability. We do see some associations with delaying past 12. I think where I'm getting with this, Emma, is even when it's complicated, that doesn't mean we don't have guidance. So we
Yeah.
have a first device guide that I think can be helpful, just
Mhm.
a set of questions that's like, let's instead of just phone or no phone, let's step back and be like, what's the purpose?
Yeah.
What problem are we hoping to solve with this phone? Is it that they are biking to school and there's no payphone, so they might need to get a hold of an adult? Is it that
Right.
I need to connect with some of my friends and I feel left out? Is it that I have family that I need to connect with across multiple households? So is what's the purpose? Has that purpose persisted over time? And does everybody in the family agree? Like, yes, this is a
Yeah.
need. And then we can start looking at, okay, so what is the least amount of technology we can deliver to meet that need? So as opposed to saying, okay, you want independence, so we're going to give you a phone with every social media platform, unfettered access. We're going to say, okay, it seems like you need to be able to contact a few pre-approved adults when you're a
Right.
young adolescent. So we're going to start there, and then
Mhm.
we're gonna get things wrong. We're gonna learn from our mistakes, and then we're gonna slowly expand access over time. So even when we say it's complicated, we still can deliver some guidance of how to do it in ways that help young people navigate. Um, take advantage of the opportunities without falling into too many of those early risks with just
Yeah.
unfettered access.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I really appreciate that reminder that we actually do know a lot about adolescence. We know a lot about child development. We know so how can we tie these really specific questions back to
Yeah.
a reminder of what we do
Yeah.
know. And through the last 40 minutes, I've been noticing you've used words that are directly from Fred Rogers, what he called the six fundamentals of learning and
Mm,
growing, which for anyone who's engaged with the Fred Rogers Institute, you know that we really rely on these six ideas a lot. And you've talked um, over and over about curiosity, and
mhm,
that's that's such an important thing for all of us to be curious about the young people in our lives, curious about ourselves. You've talked a lot about noticing and paying attention, which makes me think about looking and
mm,
listening carefully. And
mhm,
when Fred Rogers wrote about these six fundamentals, which we've shared in the chat, so you can kind of
mm.
see those, but he was talking about kindergarten readiness and television use and was saying, well, these are the six things that I think we all really need for being able to learn and grow.
Yeah.
And he was digging into how can television be supportive of those or
Yeah.
um, where is it not? And
Mm,
when you were describing like what we can protect. So we need to protect sleep. We need to protect a focus around learning. Um, what I was hearing was we need to honor those things. We need to
yeah.
honor sleep for what it is.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's not so much about keeping out something bad, but just what do we prioritize and focus on and make sure we protect because we care about it.
Yeah,
Um,
I love that honoring language. That's beautiful.
mhm.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that. And
we
that
can always
notice
come
and
back to
observe,
that.
you were probably going to keep going with the beautiful fundamentals,
No.
which are such guideposts. But I just want to note, just to put some,
Mhm.
like, they can feel so soft, this idea of like noticing,
Right.
curiosity. And I think what we know and what you know from the data is that these are not soft interventions. Like these are evidence-based. They're really protective, not only because they tend to build up that warm, caring relationship that we know is very protective for adolescent risk taking. So we could not concoct a better antidote to risk taking in a laboratory if we tried than the power of uh, a warm, caring adult who cares about me, knows what I'm up to, um, you know, cares about what I care about in the world, helps me express my spark. Like we have so much evidence on the buffering power of connected relationships. So that kind of feeds those relationships, but it also helps us really provide more targeted supports. So if I observe that my teenager is playing video games to connect with his friends, and those connections are by and large healthy. There isn't contact from
Mhm.
unwanted strangers.
Right.
And that there might be some stuff that's gray area, but we're figuring out, what do you do if that happens? But they're
Hmm.
using technology, I observe, to move towards their friendships. That's going to be very different from if I notice or observe that my teenager is using video games to avoid their
Yeah.
friendships, to
Yeah.
avoid that feeling of anxiety they might have when they try to navigate conflict, when they're engaged in isolated use and more compulsive use. It might be the same game, but my observations of
Mm.
what's going on around them, what the purpose is, what are the kinds of relationships, those two teenagers are probably having very different mental health and well-being outcomes. But I'm not going to see that and be able to provide those kinds of targeted supports unless I go beyond just time in front of a video game to with
Right.
who, why. Is it crowding out things or is it helping them move forward towards those things? So, just a quick example of how these are actually really important strategies. It's not just sort of like, oh, isn't it nice to connect? And I know that the Fred Rogers world knows just how essential and evidence based this is, but very
Mhm.
practically, observing, I've noticed even some observations in the chat, like observing if kids are getting a lot of contact from unwanted strangers,
Right.
if they're engaged in activities that then afterwards they have a lot of negative self-talk, or they are, only looking at body and thinspiration and fitspiration influencers. Like
Right.
noticing that is really different from noticing that they've curated their timeline. They have like tried to hack the algorithm a little bit. They're kind of they're demonstrating some agency around that. Really different outcomes and really different supports and different things that I might do next. So these kinds of um, these kinds of conversations give us more than just relational capital. They also give us really important data on the kinds of supports our kids might need.
And I just feel so encouraged hearing that because what I'm taking away from this conversation is um, even when we don't have perfect data and answers about exactly how and when and why, we know so much already. There is so much that we
Yeah.
do know. And then what you were just saying is we as parents or as the educator who knows this person, we
Hmm.
are exactly the ones who can be really, really noticing and attending to what is the impact that I'm seeing
Yeah.
that's happening here about around this engagement. So that just feels really encouraging to me. Maybe there isn't it'd be great to have a flow chart of yes, this, then, when,
Yeah.
but we
It
know a
turns
lot.
out we're complicated. Yeah.
Yeah, it turns out we're complicated, and we are the people who are best, have the most capacity to be able to do this well, of really,
Yeah.
really paying attention, and that feels really encouraging. And you were talking about some of the really positive things that you can see that happen, um, and we've had a couple questions come through
Hmm.
about using technology, social media, other tools to for young people to engage with these things as creators, not just consumers.
Mhm.
Um, and actually, one of the quotes from Fred Rogers that I had pulled to be able to think about today, I will read it here and we'll drop it in the chat too. So he said, without human beings, there never would have been a computer or anything else that we call advanced technology. That's something I like to help children remember, that no matter what the machine may be, it was
Mm.
people who thought it up and made it, and it's people who make it work. Um, so what about that? What about
I
that as
love
an
that.
offering for young people? Like, we're the ones
I
that create.
l- I love that. I mean, come on, with the Miss Fred Rogers quotes. They're so
They're
helpful because
good.
they're so generative for our
Mm-hmm.
I think when I hear that, I do think of this idea of agency and self-directed use, which can be just about choices of what I'm consuming, but also really thinking about stepping into the driver's seat of that idea of creating and producing and changing from just this sort of I'm taking what's given to me to I am stepping into this idea of creating the machine. Um, and I think that we have some pretty great, in the book, we talk a lot about building bridges between students or young people's digital interests and ways that they can build those interests around purposeful adults and purposeful peers. And I think that gets to that idea of creativity as well. So if you aren't familiar with like the Connected Learning Alliance and some of the work in that area, where we're really thinking not just about turning screens off, but if you're interested in video games, what if you learn how to produce music that might go
Yeah.
along a video game, right? What are we, when we're starting to try to understand AI, it's like, how are these systems built and what are they trained on? And what if we built a little chatbot that was really about prioritizing the things I care about? And so, as we think about the kinds of ways to invite young people into that creator mode, I think there's so many opportunities. We think about maker spaces, we
Yeah.
think about producing things like music and beats and videos, and young people are really leading the way in that. They're already doing that in social media platforms. And I like to think of, this is also an opportunity for us to think about how to build a bridge into these connected learning spaces that are happening in libraries and community media centers and after school programs where they're shifting from, technology's fun and I just hang out and mess around to I can explore my interests, I can build skills, and I can participate in the world using these tools creatively, politically. That's right. That is what we want for teenagers. And so sometimes when parents have been spending a lot of time wrestling video game controllers out of kids' hands, it's like, what are the programs in our community that are accessible where we can make video games or we can, produce things? And building those bridges can be so helpful.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's exciting. It's exciting to think about these things that we can do and watch young people do. So since we only have a little bit of time left, I wonder if we can talk about the word courage because I noticed that
Mm.
that word is really present in a lot of your work. And what, it takes a lot of courage to be a parent. It takes a lot
Oh,
of courage to be an educator and be a person who is still figuring out what it means to be a person and also trying to steward these younger people along and help them figure out how to be a person. So I'm just curious where that came from for you to keep going back
yeah.
to this word courage in this work.
Yeah, I love that. I think that word for me is useful. I love that you grounded it in this, that parenting is really courageous, because I do think that part of courage to me, as we think about what that means to raise courageous kids, to be courageous parents, is to sort of that work of, core is like to follow our heart, but also to be able to do that and thinking about what are the things I'm going to have to sort of struggle to work through in order to do that kind of emotional discernment. And young
Yeah.
people are doing really courageous things like, am I doing this because everybody is doing it, or am I doing it because it helps me? And that
Mhm.
doesn't happen overnight. That takes a lot of sort of emotional, courageous discernment. We often talk about the courage of introspection with parents, that so often we're trying to do things to teens, but a lot of the work of parenting is courageous introspection, which is
Mm,
like, what's coming up for me in this? What are my fears? What am I scared of? What boundary do I need to set that I just haven't set and I have to like
yeah.
step up? What conversation have I been avoiding because it's so awkward that I need to like gather that inner courage to align my actions with my values, um,
Mm,
and to align my actions with what I know my kid needs, which is sometimes different from what my neighbor's kid needs, and to be able to trust sort of the observations that I'm making in my own family based on my own access to support. It's like every family is just really trying to figure this out. So
yeah.
I think the reason courage is meaningful to me is because it's a invitation into that kind of messiness, that messiness that is parenting. Rarely do we wake up and say like nailing it, like I was born for this job, everything is smooth and easy, I'm living in total alignment at all times. That's
Yeah.
just not how it works. Like parenting, if it feels messy, if it feels complicated, that probably means we're doing it right. And that
Yeah.
work of courageous introspection of like, okay, what matters to me? What kind of human am I hoping to share the world with in 10,
Mm,
20 years? And how do I
yeah.
need to, how do I align my choices with that? And when I make a mistake, how do I have the courage to say that I messed up? And can we try again? Can we
Yeah.
figure this out together?
Yeah.
And that kind of collaborative courage is a lot of what parenting teens is all about. We're sort of turning towards
Mm,
each other with our like, oh, we made a mistake. How do we make sense of it? How do we keep going?
wow. Yeah, thank you for that. And I, again, heard a lot in your answer there about slowing down and
Mm,
paying attention and noticing both um, both in the direction of our children, but also and especially in the direction of ourselves.
yeah.
Courage, the courage required to really look at what's coming up for us and
Yeah, not easy.
yeah,
Because we're
no,
modeling, we're not just I mean, there's a lot of talk of modeling in this space, and we know it's a
yeah.
powerful driver of adolescent tech habits is what their parents
Mhm.
and caring adults are doing. So
Mm,
we can say that you should be focused on relationships, but if we're texting all through dinner or we are
right.
constantly have technoference, which is like technology bringing us away from the people in front of us, like they're
Yeah.
noticing that. If we're sleeping with our phones cradled by our heads, they're noticing that. But I also think we're modeling all kinds of other beautiful things. Like I made a mistake and I want to figure out what the next step is to fix it.
Hmm.
I'm modeling self-compassion and self-worth.
Hmm.
I am modeling curiosity. I'm modeling play when we're watching YouTube together and we're just laughing so
Yeah.
hard. That we're not just modeling tech on and off. We're
Right.
modeling like how are we thoughtfully engaging with it? And that does
Mhm.
involve this kind of slowing down. And our tech isn't designed to help with that. Our tech is designed for like frictionless, fast, get on
Right.
the internet and stay there for as long as possible. So it
Right.
does talk about courage. It takes a lot to slow that impulse down.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely. Wow. Well, we're going to pause there and continue this conversation though in just a few weeks. January 8th, we'll be talking again. And there are some really great questions that came through that we didn't get to, but that we're going to save. And one thing we like to do here at the Institute is take these conversations and sort of pull out some of the takeaways and
mm,
share them. So we'll be doing that. Um, and we have three more conversations, like I said, at
yeah,
least to come. So I'm going to share in the chat now the link to information about those upcoming conversations. And for everyone, please register for those, even if you can't join live, you'll get the recording. So we hope you can join us for those conversations too. And I want to share just a couple other things, announcements from the Institute. So we do have an evaluation we'd love for you to complete about this conversation so we can learn how to have better and more supportive conversations. If you are in Pennsylvania, we are able to offer Act 48 credit, so we'll share that in the chat too. And then this coming summer, we will have our Work of Fred conference here in person at the Institute. And our call for proposals is open now. So I know a lot of you joining us are working in this space and doing really interesting work in this space. So we would love to hear about it. So please let us know what you're doing if it's something you'd like to share with peers who are like-minded at our conference. And then finally, I want to just share we have a podcast. We have a new episode that'll be coming out on Thursday. It's a really cool conversation. So if you enjoyed this conversation, you will probably enjoy that one as well. And we will all hopefully be back together in January to keep talking about this because there's so much. But Erin, thank you so much. I really appreciate this conversation and grounding it in an acknowledgement of what's hard and what we do really need to be concerned about, but also like the potential and so much good and that we all have within us the
Mm.
ability to make these decisions and figure these things out. Thank you.
Yeah, in so many ways, it feels like when it comes to kids and tech, we feel like we're on this like tight wire, and one wrong
Yeah.
move and the whole thing falls apart. And I like
Right.
developmental science just reminds us that there are so many ways to get it right. There are so many ways to get it right, and that turning towards each
Yeah.
other and turning towards the young people that we care about is definitely the first step towards that. So I really love every time we get the chance to work together, and I'm so glad we're in
Mhm.
this series together. So thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all very much for being here. Happy holidays, and we'll see you in January.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Thank you all.